On this week's episode of Whether or Not, we have a jam-packed show filled with nature in the news stories. Colby has the details on your weekend's forecast, and Drew has a story on the Windy City. All that and more coming right up. Whether or Not starts right now. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Whether or Not for 2017. I'm your host, Brian Cizek.
And I'm your forecaster, Colby McCabe.
Well, Colby, it's been the first week back for the spring semester, and we haven't really had a dull moment weather-wise.
No, we had some mixed wintry precipitation earlier in the week, causing some students to definitely slip and fall on their way back from class. But that little bit changed later in the week, didn't it?
Right, it was interesting because right after that wintry event, temperatures really bounced up pretty high.
It was very nice to feel something different, but don't get used to it because with my forecast coming up, we'll see a change back to seasonable temperatures in the mid to upper 30s with a slight chance of snow Saturday night.
All right, looking forward to that, but without further ado, let's get to nature in the news stories. Two new space-based lightning sensors have been launched and are scheduled to go live in 2017. They will join the growing organization of ground-based lightning detection networks, leading one prominent researcher to describe this year as the golden age of lightning measurement and research. Once considered little more than a weather byproduct, lightning now could become one of its best predictors. Meteorologists now know that lightning flash rates are correlated with storm intensification and severity, which means more advanced warning can be given for severe weather events. The new space-based lightning sensors should help researchers learn even more about this electrifying phenomena.
A local company has recently developed a way to combat hunger and reduce landfill waste. 412 Food Rescue, a nonprofit organization, has coordinated with developers over the last year and a half to create Food Rescue Hero, an app that can be downloaded on your iPhone or Android. This app, described as the Uber for food recovery, allows volunteers to receive notifications that show them when and where they can pick up leftover food, how much of it is involved, and where they will deliver it. The organization, which currently has more than 450 volunteers, has saved over 750,000 pounds of food in the past year. The success of this app shows that technology, when used productively, can have a positive impact on both humans and the environment.
Torrential storms brought snow, mudslides, flooding, and hurricane-force winds to Northern California earlier this week. The extreme weather was triggered by the meteorological phenomena known as Pineapple Express, which ushers north an atmospheric flow of warm, moist air from the tropical waters of Hawaii. Some locations in the Yosemite Valley and Lake Tahoe regions received several feet of snow, while others received more than 12 inches of rain. One ski resort recorded a record-breaking 173 mile-per-hour wind gusts at its peak, the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane. Sadly, the storm toppled an 1,000-year-old giant sequoia known as the Pioneer Cabin Tree, a well-known tourist attraction with a tunnel carved into its base wide enough for a car to pass through. More strong storms are expected in the region as officials work to clean up.
The already endangered polar bear could potentially become extinct if decisive action is not taken to combat climate change, according to the Fish and Wildlife Service, or FWS. They believe that the best way to save them from extinction is by following their recently approved Polar Bear Conservation Management Plan. The pivotal point in their plan involves addressing the reduction of Arctic sea ice due to the excessive emissions of greenhouse gases. This is critical because this ice is primarily where most polar bears hunt for their food, and without it, their numbers will continue to fall as the Arctic sea ice continues to melt. In fact, a recent study by the FWS states that there is a 70% chance that the polar bear population will decrease by 1/3 in the next 35 years as a result of melting Arctic sea ice. Though the conservation plan will cost about $13 million between 2017 and 2021, the FWS is hoping that the incoming presidential cabinet will support and advance their goals in helping to save these polar bears from extinction. Hi, I'm Colby McCabe here to give your Central PA forecast. So we're looking at more seasonable temperatures, unlike that mild Thursday we just had. As we look onto the surface map for Friday, we'll see a low pressure off to the south, looking not so much in the form of precipitation anywhere near State College area, looking at mostly sunny, pretty nice but more seasonable temperatures. As we go into the next day, however, Saturday, we're looking at a slight chance, there's some snow. This low pressure system is going to intensify slightly, giving us a small chance of some snow. Nothing too extreme. We're not looking at any heavy precipitation amounts or anything, not even an inch maybe, but it's a chance, and we're hoping that it's not too much, but maybe a chance less of an inch or so. Going into Sunday, though, we're going to see a return to some nice weather. But we're looking at seasonable temperatures, like, again, very similar to Friday. You see the rain from the moving low pressure system off the eastern seaboard mainly remains to the south. So looking at a mixture of clouds and sun, a little more clouds than Friday, but once again, some seasonable temperatures looking at Sunday. As we look into specifically your Friday forecast, 39 degrees, mostly sunny and cooler. It's looking pretty good. A very nice day for a last day of classes for the week for the students here. Looking into Friday night, cloudy. Your typical 26 degrees, a little higher than average, but not too much, and it's very seasonable, so won't feel too bad outside. You'll need your winter jacket, but nothing too excessive. Looking into Saturday now, here's where our chance again, 32 degrees, overcast with some chance of some snow. Nothing too much in the form of accumulation. Looking at a chance, but nothing too bad, but something nice to look outside on Saturday for your weekend. On Sunday, we're looking at a little bit warmer, mixture of clouds and sun, high of 40 degrees, but it should be pretty good. Another sunny day to enjoy your last day of the weekend, maybe enjoy some of those football games coming up. And that's my forecast. I'm Colby McCabe. Now we have a feature from Drew on the Windy City.
Chicago. Growing up in this bustling town, you get used to a host of weather conditions, but in my opinion, one is always reign king: the wind. In the summer, the breeze off the lake gives Chicagoans a desperately needed cooling off, but in the winter, it's your worst enemy. Because I grew up with this love-hate relationship with the wind in Chicago, I always assumed the nickname for Chicago, the Windy City, came from its notorious wind. However, this might not be the case. First, let's back it up a bit and learn about Chicago's roots. In the early 1800s, the land where Chicago resides was inhabited by the Potawatomi people. In the 1830s, an African-French man named Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable helped the native people bring Chicago to its knees. And in 1837, Chicago had officially become a U.S. city. Its name came from a type of smelly onion growing on Lake Michigan's banks called Chickaqua. So if this is where the official name for Chicago comes from, where does the term Windy City originate? Well, growing up as a meteorologist, my thought was always that the nickname came about due to the windiness of the city. But could I have been wrong all these years? I turned to my ex-coworker and chief meteorologist Tom Skilling with WGN Chicago for the answer. Tom is an Illinois native and got his degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's been a meteorologist at WGN for nearly 40 years and can probably tell us a thing or two about the history of the Windy City.
Well, it's interesting. The Weather Service does wind statistics for about 300 different cities, and we rank out of the 300 cities the number 76. So it turns out we're among the 25% windiest cities in the country, but we're nowhere near the top. Our moniker, Windy City, has nothing to do with the wind in this city, interestingly enough. And yet, when you look at the setup for the city, we sit astride Lake Michigan. If you get a north-northeast wind, that wind comes almost friction-free, and it can blow 280 miles unobstructed when it's north-northeast, right down the length of the lake. There's nothing to slow it down. So our strongest winds tend to occur when we have a north-northeast full-fetch wind that runs down the length of the lake unimpeded by geographic barriers or vegetation or buildings or anything like that.
Speaking of the lake, it surprisingly plays another role in making Chicago windy.
What happens there is you've got the lake warming slowly in the wintertime, the summertime, and the springtime, and so there's quite a temperature gradient that develops between the landmass that's heating more quickly seasonally in the warmer months of the year, spring and summer, than does the lake. So you have the lake cold, the land next to it warm, the air is buoyant over the land, begins to rise, you get the colder, denser air off the lake to come in because you create a pressure gradient between the lake and the inland areas. And so you get an onshore breeze by day, and then at night you get a land breeze effect because we'll cool off quickly in the land and the lake will retain heat at night. And so you'll have a situation where the inland areas go quite cool compared to the lake surface temperature. And so the reverse occurs at night. You get an onshore lake breeze by day and an offshore land breeze at night many times.
One final reason our city may seem more windy than it actually is, in fact, comes from our towering skyscrapers.
It's interesting, it's anytime you confine a wind to a smaller space, as you do in an underpass or whatever, you increase the wind velocity there. It's kind of a Venturi effect, if you will. So the air squeeze between the buildings can really blow. And the canyons downtown are quite formidable. And so you channel that air right down, between the buildings, and it gets quite windy there.
So, if the wind isn't exceptionally strong in Chicago, why is it called the Windy City? Let's check back in with Tom one more time to see if he has any insight on this.
In fact, the moniker Windy City doesn't derive from meteorology at all, or the climatology of the city. It came about in an unflattering manner. The New York press referred back in the 1800s when an exposition was running here in the city that was being promoted by Chicago journalists and politicians. They were so vocal about it in their praise of their home city that the New York press used to say, it's that windy bunch from the Windy City. And that was how we came to be known as the Windy City.
The term's true origin is fuzzy, but it seems to be linked to Chicago's strong rivalry with Cincinnati in the 1860s. And with Chicago taking the World Fair in 1893, competing cities like Los Angeles and New York grew grudges for the city and adopted the nickname too. Despite the slanderous background of the nickname for the city, Chicagoans nowadays have learned to embrace the term. Personally, I think it's a great nickname for a great city.
Looking at a wet and mild week coming up here in the State College area, I'm Colby McCabe here to give you an extended forecast. I'm going to first give you a quick recap of what happened what's going to happen this weekend. 39 degrees on Friday with a mixture of clouds and sun. Slight chance of snow on Saturday, maybe a coating, but not too much, with 32 degrees as the high. And then Sunday, a nice better day, 40 degrees with a mixture of clouds and sun. A nice day to stay inside and watch those NFL playoff games. Definitely. Looking at your extended forecast, we're looking at once again a wet and mild week with highs in the mid to upper 40s for most of the week. Monday, your high is going to be 36 with a mixture of clouds and sun. Tuesday, chance of rain. Best chance of rain will be on Tuesday. As the system pushes out, a little more on Wednesday rain, but Thursday maybe a slight chance, but not too much. Friday looking better with a mixture of clouds and sun and a high of 47 degrees. And as you can see, the average of this time of year is usually 34. So this is a pretty nice change from what we're typically expected this time of year at State College. So that's what Friday's looking like.
Well, thanks, Colby. Looks like we're in store for a fairly mild week next week, all things considered.
That's right, Brian. It's not your typical State College January weather, but the rain might put a damper on any outside plans you might have this week despite the mild temperatures.
Well, I'll be sure to dust off the old umbrella and be ready to take it to class with me next week.
But you probably will not need the heavy winter jacket.
Well, thanks. And now for our Weather Whiz Quiz. Earlier in the show, we asked you which wind direction brings Chicago, Illinois, the strongest winds. A, southwest, B, north-northeast, C, west-southwest, or D, northwest. If you answered B, you are correct. As Tom explained earlier in Drew's feature, a north-northeast wind will run down the length of Lake Michigan.
That's right, Brian. And without buildings and trees to create friction, sustainable wind speeds can become their strongest in Chicago.
Well, it sure seems when the wind's blowing from that direction, Chicago sure lives up to its nickname.
That's true.
Well, that's all we have for you today. I'm your host, Brian Cizek.
I'm your forecaster, Colby McCabe.
And have a great weekend.